What's up?
How you doing?
Good. Well, I just ate a French dip, so I feel kind of puffed up. So
Yeah.
we'll see as we go, but I feel pretty good right now.
Well, fucking A. Yeah, I'm just barely getting everything together. Looks like we managed to cram it in last second, figure out this technical shit.
I don't see your slides down here anymore. I think you got to re-add them because you kept popping in and out.
You are kidding me. Okay. Oh, here we go. Bam.
Yeah.
At least it was still there for me to do that with.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there we go. Cool. And you're kicking it off.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and kick it off. So, welcome everyone today to the Invisible Residence. I'm Matthew Wright from the Breeder Syndicate. This is my co-host Nick Coffin Callis from the Invisible Night School. So yeah, he's got his classic case of the Lake Michigan encounters, which I think it's rad because I don't think you've ever been able to present it really in depth, full like you want to.
Well, every time I do, I intend to, and then I finish, and I'm like, oh shit, I remember I forgot this chunk and that chunk and stuff like that. So I'm gonna try it again.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see if I forget anything.
We'll see. If it sucks, we'll just scrub it. Do it again. Right. That's the beauty of this. So yeah. So I've been recently looking into the Dodleston case, or the Dodleston messages, I should call it. There's a few other podcasts that have covered it, and they've covered it. Some of them covered it really, really freaking well. Mm-hmm. I wrote down a few of them, but of course I left the other paper in the other room. So that doesn't really matter right now. But most of this is going to be based off the book, The Vertical Plane by Ken Webster. Mm-hmm. And it is a very weird, I guess you could say paranormal, maybe time travel, maybe poltergeist type case.
Yeah.
There's not a lot out there about it, but what few things there are really good. There was one of the Y Files about 6 months ago that he covered. I can't remember the other guy's name, but he actually does such a good job of it. He's the only person I think that really delved heavy into the book. Mm-hmm. But I was going through it, and I decided I was going to do it in a few parts because there's a lot of stuff still not covered that's in the books that I found interesting that haven't been mentioned in any of these other presentations.
Nice.
So we're going to go ahead and start off from the beginning.
Cool. Yeah, I only kind of vaguely know this story, so this will be good.
All right. You want to put it in? Add the slideshow in? Yep.
Slides.
Perfect.
All right.
Okay, so most of these pictures are from The Vertical Plane by Ken Webster. Some were found online, but it all started in 1984. There was Ken Webster, Nick, who is a female, and for a while I didn't get that, and not that really her sexual identity really matters, but the name was Nick, so I was picturing a guy most of the time. It's a lady.
How's it spelled?
NIC. Maybe Nicole, maybe. I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, you solved that one. Mystery solved next.
And then mystery solved. And then Debbie. Debbie was their other roommate. So there were three roommates, and as they do in England, they had a house named Meadow Cottage.
Yeah.
It was an 18th century brick cottage. So I think we have, let's see. So this story revolves around a PC.
Right. It's one of those microcomputers that's mostly just a keyboard,
It's supposed to be slide 2. What the heck? Anyway.
Look at your slide.
It's a PC. It was a picture of it. This is the chip inside this PC. And so the story goes that Ken Webster is a teacher at a place called, and it's important, it's different than it's pronounced. It's Hawarden or Harden, but it looks like Hawarden. But so American people would pronounce it Hawarden.
Sauce style.
Yeah. So it's Harden School, and that comes in later. And at this school, they get some BBC microcomputers. Now, BBC, the channel, decided to work with some computer company, and they produced these computers, and a lot of schools had them. And the teachers were able to take them home to work on their lesson plans, whatnot, check them out. And these had a chip installed in them called the Edward chip. And these were made about 11 miles from the Dodleston school, or the school where Harden School.
The chips were made in the area?
Yeah, 11 miles away. These chips specifically were made for these BBC micro. And this was basically a word processing software.
Right.
So that was what was loaded on the computer. And it sounds like in the book, and they don't mention this in any of the other podcasts, but it sounds like they had possibly some other software loaded on there, or on the 5.25 floppy drives. Like I believe they mentioned they played Space Invaders sometimes,
Okay.
and other stuff like that. So this is what it kind of centers around, is this chip and this BBC microprocessor. So they brought it home from school. It was a Model B, and I think that's important. I don't know why, but some people I noticed were really searching online trying to figure out what model it was. Also, what version of the Edward chip processing chip was on there, and I believe they said 2.0 for anybody interested in that.
Mhm.
Now, during this time in 1984, so we're talking around January. I'm sorry, what's before January? No, January is 1984. There's just no before January 1984. Come on. Anyways, so it's about January 1984, I want to say, and they were having weird events happen at their house. They were having what they would later consider poltergeist type events at their house.
Okay.
They noticed they started doing some restoration, and as you know, in paranormal communities, when people start doing restoration or redeveloping houses, things start happening.
Sure.
So they were restoring part of this 18th century brick house, and they noticed that there were footprints, six-toed footprints, walking up the wall. And it was somewhere in between the kitchen and I believe the dining room. And at one point, they even went and painted over these footprints and just figured, someone played a prank, whatever, you know.
Right. Yeah.
They showed back up the next day, and I believe they were done in ash. And there was also weird stuff being stacked around the house. They had tins and 2-liter bottles, tins of cat food, sacks of cat food all stacked on each other, these weird little stackings. And here's a picture of the manor. This is an actual picture of the house. This was what it looks like on the inside. It's a little hard to see, but here's the kitchen. Here's the living room. So right around here is where a lot of the events took place.
I can't see your cursor. So
you can't see the cursor? Well, that doesn't help. Right by the kitchen, between the kitchen and the living room.
And anyone listening on the podcast can't see this at all. It's what? It's a 2-story house. It's almost like a 4-square. It looks like, if you're familiar.
They can't. Is the slideshow not loaded?
No, the slideshow's loaded. I'm talking about the audio only.
Okay. And then we have the stacked cups here, and this is another regular occurrence. These are kind of the events that were going around at the time.
This is like a typical poltergeist phenomenon, is the stacking of objects.
Yes.
When you're not looking, usually like over a short period of time too.
Yes.
And I notice it actually says this on the bottom of your slide, RSPK. Well, it's like random spontaneous psychokinesis, which is kind of the parapsychologist's perspective on poltergeists, where people, almost like spontaneous human combustion, they will develop during parts of their life, sometimes during stress or changes in life, they will develop psychokinetic abilities. That will
hormonal changes
and same effects as a poltergeist. Sounds, stacking objects like this. And this is the 80s, so I mean, it was a big time for that. That was kind of like the ghost hunters and the parapsychologists were kind of clashing on this issue, I think. But not a lot. But anyway, continue.
So this is the kind of regular events that were happening there.
Yeah.
And let's see. So this is the first poem that they received. So one of the times when they came home, and this was around the poltergeist activity and stuff. Mm-hmm. Actually, I should go back a little bit. The reason that Ken brought this computer home mainly was for his roommate Nick, who was writing. I can't remember what word they used, but they were writing some kind of scripts of sorts, and they were using it for word processing. So Ken was going through it one day and wanted to see what Nick had been writing, what they've been working on. Yeah. So he looks at the files and he noticed that, and this was also something not mentioned on podcast, but is in the book. He knew that Nick, when they save files, they would save them with a single letter. Mm-hmm. And he noticed that there was a file named, and it was spelled KDN, which is each one of their first name's initials.
Yes.
So he opened it up. And right here is a screenshot of a really weird poem. And this is exactly how the dot matrix printer printed it out.
Oh, yeah.
And it's hard to see there, but I go on to the next thing. And here's what it actually says. Ken, Deb, Nick. True are nightmares of a person that fears safe are the bodies of the silent world. Turn pretty flower, turn towards the sun, for you shall grow and sow, but the flower reaches too high and withers in the burning light. Get out your bricks. Pussy cat, went to London to seek fame and fortune. Faith must not be lost, for this shall be your redeemer. So it's kind of out there. They weren't familiar with any poems that were written like this. Mm-hmm. And he asked Nick about it. He thought that it might be something that his roommate Nick had written. And mm-hmm. Nick said, no, I didn't write that. A few days passed, actually, and into February. They start having a lot of activity like this pop up in February. This is when a good portion of the case happens in February of 1984. During this time, the activity continued every few days. Mm-hmm. So it was like every few days they would have something scattered, changed, manipulated, stacked. There were like packs of lager bottles stacked parallel. And it was always within 3 feet of the exposed brick mortar, wherever they had been by that room wherever they were doing restoration. It was always within 3 feet of that pillar. And at one point on the logger, they had like a plastic string wrapped around it, mm-hmm. and it was all burnt up. So they got a little more concerned when they started knowing that fires were starting. So we get the first message. Let's see. Where is it? Maybe it didn't even make it in. That's the poem. The first message isn't in here, but I will read it to you since it didn't make it in. It is. It was really odd. 1 second. I know it's screwed up here. That's the nightmares one. So the first
to kind of like clarify, they have this computer at their home with a word processor on it, maybe Space Invaders. Periodically, they're going and checking in the files of the word processor files, and there are new ones in there that none of the people living in the house claim to have written.
Exactly.
In fact, they insist that they did.
And at this moment, there's nothing but that poem that popped up on there. Mm-hmm. And
weird enough.
And he would have to check the computer back into the school, right? So he'd have to check the computer back in the school. They wait a few weeks. We get into February, and he gets the first what we would consider a message mm-hmm. from someone else. And it's not written in poem form, but it is written in a form of archaic English, or so it seems. Mm-hmm. So what the actual words were that he wrote were, I write on behalf of Maine. What strange words thou speak, although I must confess that I hath been ill-schooled sometimes, methinks altercations are somewhat barful. For they break many as sleeps in mine bed. Thou art goodly man who have fanciful woman who dwell in mine home. I have no want to affray for online scythe, mine half-witted antic has ripped a twain, mine bound hath I been wretched, blah, blah. Anyways, as you can see, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But there was a man named Peter Trinder at the local school that worked with Ken, and he was one of the English teachers, and he had actually taught Ken Webster quite a bit about the English language, not how to speak it, but how to formulate it, more about it. And he considered himself somewhat of a history buff. Mm-hmm. And Ken was taking not just the poem, but like this message. He would take them to school and show his employees. So they were kind of hip to what was going on with the poltergeist phenomena and the messages. And as best Peter Trinder could break this down, he said, I write on behalf of many. What strange words you speak, although I must confess that I too have been badly educated. Sometimes it seems changes are somewhat obstructive. For many a time they disturb me sleeping in my bed. You are a worthy man who has a fanciful woman, and you live in my house. I have no wish to alarm you, for it is only since the half-witted fool trick, it says, ripped apart my confines, I have been tormented at nights. I have seen many changes, lastly, the schoolhouse and your home. It is a fitting place with lights which the devil makes and costly things which only my friend Edmund Gray can afford, or the king himself. It was a great crime to have stolen my house. L.W.
Interesting.
And so it sounds like they're being accused of breaking into this man's house who is writing them in archaic language.
Right.
So that's kind of where Peter Trinder here took it. He was really interested in the whole case, and he stayed with most of the case through the time and did a lot of the transcriptions. He also did a lot of the historical documentation looking into the letters, and because there were many more that followed after this. Let's see. That was the we got through that one, and then so the roommates were talking about what it could be. Is it potential poltergeists? Is it ghosts? What could it be? And he had already kind of been into, or one of his friends, I want to say his name was John Cummins.
Oh, yeah.
He insisted that they give a response to this message because nobody knew if it was a hoax. No one was taking claim for it. They didn't see anybody interact with the computer. And so their solicitor friend, John Cummins, came over and they were kind of involving him in it. Like, hey, what's going on here? And he's like, well, you're kind of a dick if you don't respond either way. Like,
Agreed.
Let's chase this shit down. Let's see what he's got.
At the very least, to just continue it, to maybe figure it out more.
Yes.
What's kind of interesting about this is like, especially coming from the perspective that it's ghosts, this is, again, people using new technology to try to communicate with the dead here.
Yeah.
Which seems to happen. It's been happening since like the advent of like the radio and the telegraph.
Yes.
It seems to continue as technology progresses, and now computers using simple things like word processors and stuff. But it's kind of it's in the same vein.
It is.
It's interesting.
So this is the what they decided to write back to LW, and that's how he signed it. LW. We are sorry for disturbing you. What would you like us to do? Did you live in a house on this land in about 1620? Do you want us to tell you more about our time? Why write a poem? Who is Edward Grey? Is he related to the Egerton family? Do you have a family? Is the King James or Charles Stuart? What is the charge house? Was this village called Dodleston in your life, and how many families lived here? Thank you very much for your messages. Thank you for not making us afraid. Ken, Debbie, and John. So that's kind of what they came up with. John Cummins, who is this fellow right here.
Yeah.
That's kind of what they came up with in this letter and question for Mr. LW.
Where did they get the year 1620?
So they I want to say it was Trinder who had the idea of looking at it. He's like, this looks like it's 16th or 17th century. He said some of the stuff really looks like 1600s, but back then they didn't have punctuation. So that was like a really big tell to them. So up until this point, despite them discussing ghosts and whatnot, Ken reiterates mostly throughout this book, especially during this time, how heavily he believed it was a hoax.
Oh, okay.
He is for sure it was a hoax. At least that's what he says in the book. Like whether he was discussing that and telling other people that he thought it was a hoax, I don't know. But he definitely reiterated in the book that he thought it was a hoax. Okay. And so they sent this message. They decided to go to the pub to give Answer Man some time to answer.
Sure.
Because why not? And magically, in a few hours, they came home. And here's their answer. 'Twas an honest farm of oaken stone. It is helpful that you should tell me about thy time. Dost thou hath horse? Edmund Grey, brother of John Grey, lives at Kinnertone Hall. Thy king, of course, is Henry VIII, who is 46. I me woot of King James. Mine charge house is a place of lure, schooling. And then there's the date, and it says 1521. Now, what's interesting is despite all this stuff here, it says that Henry VIII is 46, 6 and 40.
Yes.
But it says 1521, and we know for a fact Henry VIII wasn't that age at that time that it's saying. So it doesn't match up with history at all. And again, there's a lot of these contradictions. There's punctuation. There's all this weird stuff in there. There's words that don't seem to quite fit, like maybe words that may have been added 200 years later. So on one hand, they have Tinder telling them this is very, very interesting. All this seems to fit. Whereas on the other hand, all the reading I've been doing on different Reddit forums and all the stuff going over the case, all the other English majors and stuff are saying this is way off, that this is so suspect that they don't even get it. And even in the book, Ken again reiterates that, yes, this is very suspect. This is, again, why he thinks it's a hoax. But Tinder seemed to be more on the side of trying to prove it as opposed to setting out to prove it was a hoax.
Interesting.
And that's really the impression I got from it anyways.
I think it's really odd that, from the hoax perspective, they're writing in this old-timey English, but then getting like basic stuff wrong.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's definitely weird.
Yes. It's all very weird.
Yeah. What is this one?
So the February 16th was the very first weekend that the computer was brought home for the purpose of talking with LW.
Right.
Supposedly. That's the only reason they brought it home, was just to continue the communications. And when they got home with the computer, there were 3 stacks of milk cartons on the floor. So they felt like, all right, this is a good time to hit it up, start making some stuff go. Yeah. And sure enough, within a few hours, I believe Debbie was the only one home at this time. And this popped up on the screen. My goodly friend, I must needs say how something this, that there are many things for which I have no reckoning. Methinketh it that if thou cannot tell thee for what art in my home, then I can no more help you. So then there's more of this. I'd hate to read it all out because it really does sound like gibberish for people listening. It's very hard to go through. And again, Tinder spent a lot of time supposedly transcribing this, and whether people agree with this transcriptions or not is up to debate. But this is supposedly, we do have the transcriptions, and I'm leaving them up here for a second, just so people that are actually watching the video, and not the people at home necessarily, but listening to the audio, but the people at home can screenshot it if they want to, and read it deeper. But they kept breaking it down, and they were having nice communications with the guy. Again, still confused about the punctuation, where the punctuation's coming from. There's basically right now, it sounds like Ken was trying to play along to figure out the hoax.
Sure. I think it's a good plan.
Debbie and Nick seemed like they were kind of really believing this stuff and really getting into it. And slowly Ken seems to be leaning into it more and more. More and more. And Tinder was already on the bus, it seems like.
Sure. From the jump.
Yeah. So after there's a few more exchanges. There's why the punctuation is a big point, like throughout the whole book. Yeah. And then there's some more exchanges here. My good friend, can you tell me for what reason you're asking many questions which I cannot understand? I'm confused. So basically, they're trying to get him to answer certain questions that they can then go look up at the library or local wherever, magistrate's office, what have you.
Right.
So they can go look it up and compare it to see if these people are real. Is any of this factual? So what they end up doing is this is, hold on, who brought this in? This was their friend, I believe John Cummins, that had Ken start reading this book. And this has
it's sitting on my desk right now.
There you go. The Colin Wilson Poltergeist book.
Really?
And he was very influenced in the rest of this case, and probably from there on out until today, by this book and what was going on. So they determined that it's probably, if not a hoax, a poltergeist. And according to Ken Webster in the book, poltergeist can remain for up to 6 months. I didn't know there was a time limit, but apparently there's a time limit.
I didn't know it was that strict, but thinking about the more famous poltergeist cases, that kind of jives.
Okay.
It is short-lived.
Yeah. They may even bite, which is interesting. They tend to stack objects, manipulate solid objects, levitate objects, rapping noises. What could they be? Could be, like you said, us as humans unknowingly emoting energy telekinetically.
Yeah. Random spontaneous psychokinesis.
Could be elemental spirits from the ether or another dimension, a la Valet. Or it could be the souls of recently, or actually I should say long departed humans.
Yeah.
right?
That is the general consensus, I think.
So this is one of the examples. There's a frying pan up on end on the top of a door, just sitting there.
Interesting.
That's pretty weird, hard to do, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Here's some more stuff just stacked in the hallway, cat food tins or something.
Yeah.
And Debbie and Ken, while they were investigating the poltergeist phenomena, or I'm sorry, Ken was investigating the poltergeist phenomena. Debbie and Nick were going over ley lines.
Interesting.
They were more interested in ley lines and energy across, I mean, they were in the UK, but this example, the US ley lines laying about. And so that was where they were going with it. They were more on the ether end of everything.
Yeah.
Like mysterious, somehow manipulating space-time. And of course, the messages kept coming. Over the next few months, they kept coming and kept coming. My most noble friend, have I not been friendly towards you? And yet, unless I am mistaken, I think there is not enough trust. Despite this, I have been open with you. I know not whence you came or whither you will go, nor do I have an answer for why you are in my house, but you are a goodly visitor and you may stay as long as you like. So at least he's a polite ghost.
Yeah.
Or what, poltergeist, what have you. And again, there's more messages here. And it just doesn't stop. There's a lot of interaction here. And every time there's interaction, there's no one near the computer, supposedly, as best anyone can tell. Go ahead. Yeah.
What's going on here?
So Lucas line, "'Tis good that we can be one in jape," so was quite apt, for this long message wasn't the only one that day. Under another file name, we found a short item. "My most noble friend, hath I not been accordant not nor truthful with you, thou, and yet unless me fail, methinks there is nay or not enough." He was having difficulties with the computer. It was from its construction an alternative start to the last message and looked like a telex, and they had gone astray or jammed in transmission. A nice touch if a hoax. If not, it was the sort of problem that would have arisen from difficulties in keyboarding. He would merely have carried on. Would there be no reason, no computer error that would given blah, 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 line of dots, for example, like this.
Right.
I mean, he doesn't have punctuation. What's going on here? They don't quite understand how this man is even communicating. And over time, they will kind of figure out from the way he describes it, what he's interacting with, and how he's interacting with it.
That's kind of my question, is that whatever this is, whether it's a hoax or a poltergeist or psychokinesis or something people haven't thought of yet, how is it interfacing with the essentially a hard drive?
Yes. So this is where it gets more interesting to me, and kind of links the poltergeist phenomenon that's happening at the house with Lucas right here. Okay. And this is that point. And I replied to Lucas the same day with a few comments on cars and an invitation to talk more about fishing and his time at college. In addition to the message, there was a photograph I had snipped out of a color advertisement for a Jaguar XJ Coupe. It was a different color from mine, but I thought it would do. I was unprepared for Lucas' subtle treatment of the message in the photograph, and I was even more unprepared for his reaction to what it represented. And he says some bullshit here, but the most important part of this was Lucas considered the glossy magazine clipping to be a strange kind of wood, and the photograph was charred at the edges, in fact, showing signs of heat throughout. It was very brittle and almost crumbled in my hands. Deb said that he must have taken it with him, she laughed. And I bet if he's the devil, it would burn, something rather. So he's interacting with something physical that they have touched after and starts to crumble as if it had been burnt. And here's the actual physical picture.
Let me look at that a little closer here.
See the burnt corner?
Yeah. I'm so they left that out, basically. It
doesn't really say. It's not real descriptive, but it sounds like whatever. I don't know how they attached this to a computer message, but somehow this was manipulated by his hands, and he knew to touch this message or touch this picture along with the message.
Well, I think that they're all under the impression that he's occupying the house with them.
Yes.
Sort of. So, yeah, I mean, they could have just left it out, since it seems like when they leave is when things happen, whether it's messages or it's the stacking of objects. So presumably they just left it out and he picked it up after.
And somehow associated it with what was being said to him and picked it up. But there's now interaction with objects directly connected to Lucas. This message broke new ground in one respect. Debbie was in the house, asleep upstairs during the period when it arrived. I was out with Dale Lovell. This was significant, for the Volkswagen was left outside the house and lights were on downstairs. So this meant that if there was an intruder, he was taking a real risk of being discovered. There was no smell of smoke either, which one would expect if the intruder theory was reasonably extended to the charred photograph.
Sure.
So she was the only one at the house when this happened, Debbie. And you'll find this, or I've found this many times during these events, that Debbie seems to be the only one in the house when all of this goes on. And honestly, Debbie is still the main person that interacts about this case and still talks about this case to this day. The only one of the three.
Yeah.
So I did find that interesting. Yeah, and again, not mentioned in any of the podcasts that I've watched, or you know, and I find that to be probably very, very important. And here's some more. They throw in some names, Goody Garland and Colin Cloud, for which he was imprisoned and stuff. And he tries to give them more names, and they try to get more names out of him to go study. He talks about where he studies at the Jesus College, Oxford. More names again. Tom Fowlhurst, the King's Sheriff. And what's funny is when they went to go do the research, that you'll find that there was a Fowlhurst, a Sheriff Fowlhurst, in fact. And but it was spelled differently.
Yeah.
It was spelled differently, but from the same era, you know. And again, last names like that were spelled differently during that era, spelled all kinds of different ways.
Well, whatever the thing is, it's not spelling anything right anyway, right?
Exactly. So it does match up. That part does match up.
Interesting.
And here's another quote from the book that I thought was fascinating for this time. Peter had said it would be unwise to correct Lucas on the errors about the college. The idea was to make us seem still gullible. But on a day like this, I looked forward to wholeheartedly to the next communication. Last time it had come with Deb in the house, so I went out in the car. Debbie sat in the living room very quietly with the door to the kitchen closed and everywhere locked up. A message was not long in coming. Debbie heard nothing and was surprised to open the kitchen door and see the following. And again, the reason I'm showing this is that, again, Debbie's in the house alone, other dudes out at the car. A message appears while Debbie's in the house alone, but she swears, you know, she didn't touch it. And that may be the case, but
what's the situation here? Why is she in the car and the other ones are going, or in the house and the other one's going out to the car?
Maybe she feels like she's the conduit. Maybe they feel like she's the conduit, and maybe she is the actual conduit. You know,
it makes me think of God, who did that Spirit Scope? It was kind of the precursor to the Frank's box, where you would get ghost voices from white noise.
I don't remember.
Scope. Anyway, the only time he would do it, he'd have to turn around and no one could look at what he was doing. You know what I mean? Kind of like
of course.
Trick.
And here's some more messages. Again, it's them kind of going back and forth with him about Oxford and kind of pushing him a little bit, just seeing if they'll get some more answers. And lastly, one of the most important things that I thought was they went to the library.
Yeah.
And notably, the librarian mentioned someone else had recently been researching Dodleston around that time. But she didn't say who it was, but just that someone had recently checked out books and been there researching on Dodleston. There was also mentions by Ken several times in the book of John, a guitar player who had a crush on Deb. And whenever he was thinking of the intruder theory, it's constantly who he goes back to as a suspect. Someone that had a crush on his 19-year-old girlfriend.
Oh.
Yeah. And I'm going to leave it there for today because I've already gone on like 35 minutes of a ramble about it. But I'm going to continue some more, and I'm going to keep deep diving the case, and we're going to tear it apart because it's never been debunked. Oddly enough, it's just not been debunked.
I've been called a debunker so many times. It's time for me to actually debunk something.
I know. Let's debunk this.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, like, I'm also trying to join the Facebook group to interact with the people. Maybe it's not debunkable. Maybe this is a real thing. Maybe this happened.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely. I feel similarly about my case. Maybe it is a real thing. you want to try to jump into this?
Yes, I'd love to hear it. Pretend as if I've never heard it. Let's tell it from scratch.
Right. I feel like you haven't heard it.
I haven't heard a lot of it.
This all takes place on March 8th in 1994 on the coast of Michigan that touches Lake Michigan, so the west side of Michigan. I don't know if you're familiar with your geography.
No, isn't Michigan like big 3 different land masses or 2?
Well, there's 2, but so like on your west coast you have Muskegon, Grand Haven, Holland, South Haven, and you'll hear some of these names.
Yeah.
They're right up and down the coast on the west side, along with Lake Michigan. It dips under here. You got Indiana under here, and then Chicago.
Of the Dirty Mitten part?
Yeah. You'll see. There's some maps in here too.
Okay, good.
But so there's a visual component to this and a radar component to this case. Start off with the visual. I'm just going to work through it chronologically. Okay. So at about 9 p.m., this is March 8th, which is winter. It's cold here in Michigan. Weather reports say that the northern lights were visible on this night, though living in Michigan my whole life, when the northern lights are visible, when the meteorologists say this on the news, it's really hard to see.
Yeah,
so keep that in mind, but that is something to keep in mind. Very clear that night as well. Northernmost point, I think it was Grand Haven. There's a woman named Cindy Pravda. 9 p.m. She's looking out her kitchen window. She's on the corded phone with her friend talking, and she sees what she says looks like 4 full moons sitting horizontally, just hovering there. Big white lights. They looked a bit like this. And she said the outermost one would zip away and come back, kind of as I drew in this diagram here.
Yeah.
Sat there for 20, 25 minutes, half an hour. That one would do that until they all just shot off, gone. That's about 9:30 p.m. at night.
Okay.
We moved down to Holland, Michigan, which is about 30 miles south. That's when the big start of the on the ground visual sightings begin, and we know about these because of the 911 call that was recorded.
Okay.
A lot of these witnesses called the police when they saw this thing.
Okay.
Which is really fortunate for researchers.
That's helpful.
We have their firsthand witness accounts, not tainted, not by recall or anything, like not exaggerated, and I actually have a couple videos.
Oh, awesome.
That have those clips in them. I'm gonna play the first one now, and it also kind of gives context to where these people are in association to each other. So I've pinpointed the locations of each caller while they're calling and describing the same thing and the relation to each other.
Sweet.
So I'm gonna run that first video now.
911. We were just wondering, have you heard anything about these lights that are flickering up here in what is it, the east southeast area? It's like a group. It looks like a string of Christmas lights that's way up in the sky. And we wondered if you had heard anything about it.
Not a thing. 911?
Yeah, is this the police?
We do the dispatching form service to center.
Okay, I don't know if you guys do anything on UFOs at all. I got hold on.
Oh, excuse me? Okay, what do you have there, sir?
There were at least 4 lights, and they were all flashing like okay, they were the sequence. It was a kind of like a V, and there was 4 lights, and they were blinking back and forth. And there's no way, a plane's not that wide. And then it went down to 3 lights, and it started spinning around, like it was a circular motion. Then it started going up and down, and then it went to 2 lights. It did the same thing, and now it's 1 and just spinning in a circle.
911. You guys busy?
A little bit.
I can call that. It's not a real emergency. We just called about the UFOs we thought.
Mm-hmm.
They're out there. They ain't airplanes.
Yeah, we've got a car on the way over there, let's see, right now. I've got a couple other calls.
Really? They see them too?
Mm-hmm. Where are they now? Are they...
They're just kind of hanging there. They came up as a group and then they kind of split. I bet some kind of hot air balloon or helium balloon lights on them.
Okay.
They ain't airplanes.
Yeah, we've got a car on the way. He was coming from the downtown area, so
They're kind of hanging in the general area. It's like maybe the wind might have broken them apart like they would be balloons, maybe. I don't know.
Okay, so we got a call from Stratford Way, and that's where he's heading first, and then he's going to head over to yours.
Okay, yeah, they're dead south of us now.
South of you?
Yeah, we're on 16th Country Club.
Okay.
All right, thanks a lot.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, bye.
Yeah, brother.
Central Dispatch?
Yeah, this is a non-emergency, so feel free to cut me off if something comes in. And I feel kind of silly calling, but my son insisted that I call. Is there any Air Force airplanes or helicopters flying around in Allegan or Ottawa County tonight?
Well, we've had reports out Stratford Way in that area of lights, and they're checking it out.
Stratford Way?
Yep.
Now, where would that be? We're right on Ottawa on the county line.
Yeah, it's down in that area. Right
It is?
by Holland City.
Pardon?
Right down, it's by Holland City.
Okay, because he saw them heading southeast of the county line of Ottawa and Allegan, probably right on the Kent County line, I would imagine.
Okay, yeah, we've got them checking it out. They say it's something to do with radio towers down in the area.
It has something to do with what?
Radio towers down in the area.
They were in the air.
Why don't you tell him what you saw?
Okay, I was at a real high hill, right on the county line there, and it was like at a 45-degree angle to the ground. There was like probably 4 or 5 lights, and they were all flashing right in a row from the top all the way down to the bottom. And it was sitting there for a while, and then it leveled off, and then it moved southeast. It was up in the air quite a bit.
Okay, yeah, we got an officer down the area checking on it right now.
Okay.
But
It took off real fast.
Okay, yeah, we'll let them know.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
All right. So that's the first half of the 911 call. That is the witnesses. The first voice you hear is Holly Graves, and the third voice you hear is her then husband Daryl. So it cuts back. The second group of voices you hear are Troy Prince, and I believe it's his cousin. It might be his brother. They're up around the corner on a second floor balcony. Let me throw up my slides real quick. So this is kind of a map of the neighborhood, right? You have the main intersection here, Country Club and 16th, where you can see point 1 and point 2 are right around the block from each other. This point 3 down here is 2 miles due south along that road. So what you hear essentially is the woman from point 2, then the person from point 1, then the man from point 2, and then the mother and the son from point 3.
Okay.
And this arrow here is the general direction that they see these things coming from. Now you'll hear on the tape that an officer is on the way. He was originally dispatched to go to point 1 here, but then he heard back from Daryl Graves here at point 2, so he decides to go there because they actively see it.
Yeah.
What you don't hear on the tape, but you see in Officer Velthouse's like incident report, which I have, I believe, right here, is that Troy Prince talks to the dispatcher a little more, and he says what he saw was a group of lights come together and form a circle like a ring.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what Holly and Daryl and their kids saw until they got on the phone. They called 911 at 9:35 p.m. Officer Velthouse showed up at about 9:45 p.m. In that 10 minutes, they watch it go south all along this arc here, and it splits up again into multiple lights.
It's going pretty slow though, right? Like, I mean, only 2 miles in 10 minutes.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And in fact, Daryl, the third voice on the call, you'll hear him saying that they started hanging out right around here. They stopped moving, which is corroborated by the son in that last call. He says that they were stopped here. By 9:45, Officer Velthouse arrives at location 2 here on this map, and he looks through Daryl's binoculars and he sees 2 groupings of them south. This is after that last call. So he gets in his car and he follows down Country Club Road and trails them for as far as he can until he gets to Tulip City Airport, which is miles away. It's a tiny little airport that was actually closed at the time. He thought maybe they were planes, but as he remarked in his incident report, they didn't look like aircraft, and he said that the lights were more oscillating than flashing. So next slide here. Oh,
interesting.
Yes. So this is when the 911 dispatcher, you'll hear him claim he gets about 60 calls. I don't know the true number, but he decides to call the National Weather Service, which at the time is located in Muskegon, just a few, maybe like 30, 40 miles north. just above where Cindy Pravda, the original sighting, was. And I have tape of that too. So I'm going to play the radar portion of that. Along with, after the fact, several UFO organizations investigated this case. Michael Swords from QFOS, Dalen Hynek's QFOS, and made recreation maps with Jack Bouchon, the radar operator that the 911 dispatcher gets a hold of. Now, when you hear that, there's no actual recording on the radar screen. This is like old technology. So they did make it after the fact, which, can also be inaccurate. So what I've done is I've taken the blanks that they drew on and tried to corroborate it with what he's saying in the tape. So you'll hear him speak and you'll see radar blanks and they will correspond.
Gotcha.
So I'm going to start that one now.
Weather Service, Muskegon.
Hi, Muskegon. This is Ottawa County 911 calling.
Yeah, how you doing?
Good. You guys have access to a radar there, don't you?
Yes, we do.
You do. You getting anything weird down in the southern Ottawa County area?
Anything weird? Hold on for a second.
Okay, the reason I ask is we're getting a whole bunch of calls of some strange lights in the southern Ottawa, northern Allegan County, right near Holland City area.
Strange light?
Yeah. Such as we've had about 60 UFO calls.
Oh, jeez.
Okay, I'm sitting here going, no, come on, there's got to be something more to this.
Yeah. Okay, let's see what that is. Looks like there's a large return down there. Let's see. That looks like it's up about maybe. Well, it disappeared, but it was up about 6,000 feet in about. Could have been a plane. I don't know, but it was pretty big. Wait a minute. See what that was.
We're getting a bunch of weird ones down there, and like I say, now it's starting to appears to be moving a little bit south.
Yeah, okay. Well, it moved. Let's see. Yeah, there's something big down there. Wait a minute. That's really strange. Well, oh my God! What is that?
Yeah, we're going together and coming apart.
Yeah, there's three, and they're lengthwise. Now I'm getting three of them, and I'm getting a third one now, and they're separated by about looks like about 5,000 feet in height, and about maybe.
An officer just sent me a message here. He says
about maybe they're separated by about 50 kilometers. And they're very strong returns. I'm getting a real they're spiking, so there's something pretty solid. It's not precipitation or anything, especially up at that height.
Yeah.
I'm seeing three, and they're separated by they look like a triangle on my scope. I'm looking one around down by let's see. I'm seeing one down near South Haven. I'm seeing another one over Lake Michigan, about northwest of Benton Harbor, and another one over, west of, or east of Benton Harbor, which would be near, looks like Decatur. Yeah, I'm seeing three returns. They've moved positions now. South Haven, looks like, shed more light. South Haven. Okay, that one over by South Haven just zoomed over to the northwest by about, now they changed positions again. One about 20 miles west of South Haven. Another one just above, looks like the Coloma, and the other one is just off the coast of Benton Harbor. Okay, now that one near South Haven has moved. It's moving further out into Lake Michigan. I'm getting them up. Okay, it popped. Now I'm getting four. No? I got 4 for a while. Now I'm getting another one way down. I did for a little while. These are all up around about between 7 and 12,000 feet. Okay, they look like they're moving. They're all moving toward the south, towards Chicago. There's 3 returns moving towards Chicago. They're about over center of Lake Michigan, 3 of them in a triangle, and they're about the real southern part of Lake Michigan, probably just off the coast of Berrien County.
All right.
Very good.
Sorry. So yeah, so I spoke when I started investigating this case. The first thing I did was spoke to Jack Bouchon. That was the radar operator that you heard. I had him describe it to me a lot. He said that he had the distinct feeling that not only were those objects aware that he was observing them, but he thought that they were aware that he was aware of that. Because the way he described the way they moved is, from his perspective, this is kind of a top-down perspective. I actually drew a sketch of this. He said that they would stay in a triangle formation, but on the vertical, they would jump up and down at different heights, but maintain that same position.
Oh, weird.
Right. And the way that they would move, they'd be in the triangle position, one would shoot off and then the rest would follow them, kind of similar to what Cindy Pravda was describing.
Yeah.
Now, there's one thing I wanted to kind of hit on. Oh, no, sorry. I'll go with this first. So Jack gets off the phone. It's a little hard to determine how late that call goes or when exactly in the night they get a hold of Jack. I've tried to figure that out, but judging by what the operator says, the 60 calls, I know that the tape isn't everything. It doesn't actually provide a fairly accurate timeline. However, I know that he said that he watched these things until about midnight. And you see on this slide here, they're down in that corner. He says more came from different directions and they all met up in this section of the lake here.
So more than 3?
Yes. Yes. And they came from the south and like the southwest. And they all met there eventually. And then he said they could just kind of swarmed around each other. He described it like a beehive or an anthill where they were just swarming till around midnight when they stopped. Now, he and I, in one of our talks, he brought up the fact that Lake Michigan was frozen over that night. Now, I don't know how often that happens. I think it's kind of rare, but when he mentioned that, I looked up the NOAA, they keep ice records of the lake, and I have some of those here. I don't know if you can see the numbers here.
Oh, yeah.
In that portion, that's the only portion that has 5% ice coverage compared to the rest of it.
Yeah.
That brown is 80%. That dark blue is 95. This light lavender color, here's another reading of it. The only non-frozen part, I don't know if there's any significance to that or not, obviously, but it's an interesting detail to the case.
Did anybody talk about these things coming out of the water?
Not that I've heard.
Okay.
You know, there's a few other witnesses. I've spoken with Holly Graves quite a bit. I spoke with Cindy Pravda. Well, describing
Cindy Crawford, holy shit, you're famous.
Yeah, no kidding. So she was the first one. Holly Graves, I just spoke to more recently. She was the on the ground witness right on that road with the husband and the kids at the time. Yeah. She said she watched them for a good 25 minutes, like during and after the cop came. And she said that they were bright enough that they lit up the front of her house and her lawn. And she watched them, as all of her kids saw too, in all of their descriptions, as the ring of light, or like Christmas lights, or like a wreath, like Troy Prince says. But she said she did see them split apart. And that was also corroborated by her husband and the police officer who looked through them at binoculars. It's not possible with the information I have right now to pinpoint like a moment in time where an on-the-ground witness saw it at the same time as the radar operator saw it. But there could be. So I thought I added these in my slides, but here they are. So unfortunately, MUFON investigated this case shortly after. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it is unfortunate.
From the general idea I have is that they kind of fumbled this case a bit. From from Michael Sword's impression in the International UFO Reporter issue, he said a lot of the witnesses were unwilling to talk to anybody else after they had been there.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Right. I'm a little curious as to what the purpose of MUFON is. I don't believe that they solve cases. I believe that they
collect
data, as they put it, and sit on it, and they don't share it.
Yeah.
Specifically, what is mentioned in their journal article about this, it mentions a woman in Decatur. Now, if you remember from the radar tapes, Jack mentions there was a return in Decatur. This woman at around 9:30 said she watched them jump around the night sky and filmed it, a videotape, in Decatur. Now, if we had the time or even a local landmark on that tape, we could corroborate both the visual sightings and the radar sightings at the same time. Again, later in the article, they mentioned there are 10 videotapes that are in process of waiting to be analyzed and more than a dozen photographs. At the end of this article, it says to stay tuned for part 2, and it was never released.
There never was a part 2?
Nope, this came out in September of 1994, so pretty quickly on the heels of the event. Never a part 2, and never were the tapes or photos seen again. Now, the current chair of Michigan MUFON is Bill Konkoleski. I personally have reached out to him, asked him about these photos and videos, and he says, yes, they have them. They're not spectacular to look at. I asked to see them, and he says, we like to share our information or our videos and our data on our own, and essentially told me to screw off. And then our buddy Stephen Greenstreet independently reached out to Bill Konkoleski and hoped to get those photos and videos. Bill said that, oh yeah, let me go dig them up, and then he was ghosted as well.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. Now we know, or I know, and I think I mentioned it last episode, that Unsolved Mysteries is covering this case. I think I'm allowed to say this now since they told me I was cut from the episode. But originally I did film for it.
Yeah.
But I want to know if I have a sneaking suspicion Bill Konkoleski will be in this episode, and I would, as much as it would annoy me if he released any of those photos and videos for this episode, I'd be really happy about it, just because they're out there. Because I think that's the biggest problem. This is one of, as Michael Swords put it, the best observed cases, and no one knows this case.
And the pictures just have never been public, and that's.
Right. But I mean, like any UFO compendium or case book or anything like that rarely mentions this case.
Yeah.
Yet you have visual and radar sightings of it, and not to mention the witness accounts are real time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very rare case in that sense that it was a mass sighting. All the stuff, there are pictures and videotape that exist and corroborating radar data, and it's just like. You can't see it because Bill Brasky or whatever the fuck his name is decided that you can't. That's too bad.
So anyway, MUFON was not the only group to investigate this. Like I said, Michael Swords from QFOS and his buddy Dave Ford from NICAP kind of cooperatively investigated this. It was Dave Ford who reached out to the National Weather Service, who got Michael Swords in there using his. He was a professor at Western University at the time, so he kind of used his professor card to get in and interviewed Jack. Now, in Michael Swords' account of this, he said that the station manager there, whose name was Leo Grenier, I think, he said that they insisted that they record it on tape and the tape be saved by the NOAA. Now, I've reached out to the NOAA multiple times asking them about this tape, and they've not gotten back to me. And I've asked Jack, and he said he doesn't remember a tape being recorded. So I don't know how accurate that is, but that is when they drew all the radar blanks as Jack remembered them. And it was actually a local reporter for the Muskegon Chronicle named Mike Walsh or Matt Walsh who got the 911 tape release. Like that is the biggest piece of evidence from this case. And it was a local reporter. It wasn't any of these UFO investigators.
Imagine that.
Right, yeah.
I'm with you. What the fuck does MUFON do?
I don't know.
That's actually a really good question, and I don't think enough people... I mean, I know Erica Lukes has kind of asked the same question, and it's a damn good point. What did they do other than like run interference and sell shit to Bigelow? Because that's about all I've seen happen.
Yeah, they sold all their info to Bigelow, and then they sell books and training programs to idiots. I'm sorry, no offense.
And then they hire con artists to do.
So I mean, that's what they do. And in fact, one of the two main investigators for MUFON quit MUFON in protest and brought a bunch of investigators with her. Because of mostly, I think this case was the straw that broke the camel's back about the evidence that they collected and not being able to give it back to the witnesses even.
Yeah, and that's crazy.
This person I'm thinking of, his name is Virginia Tilley. She was a Grand Rapids resident where I'm from. And she, in protest after quitting, formed her own UFO group along with a man named Dave Reinhardt. And a couple of years after this, they published a little newsletter called The Outer Connection.
Oh, cool.
Now, this was floating around town in 94. I believe. Oh, no, actually, I think this came out a little later. Let me blow that up. It came out in 97. I would have been so excited to get my hands on this at the time because I was very into UFOs back then. But little did I know. However, this issue is really interesting. It's all about the Michigan case that I was just describing. Tilly was one of the main witnesses. She goes over the account and some of her gripes with MUFON in here. But Dave Reinhardt, another member of this group called Beam Up, it's the Bureau of Investigation of Michigan something. Who knows? Yeah. It's another acronym.
Yeah.
Regardless, Dave Reinhardt tells this really interesting tale of a kind of shady deep throat character he meets in AOL chat rooms. Says he's a member of the government who happened to get a hold of some secret government files pertaining to this case. And he goes over this story, and I have this published. I actually have on my own YouTube channel. I have a video about this, but he comes to learn that this deep throat character dies, and then he gets this envelope in the mail, and in it is radar maps. Now take a look at these up close. You'll recognize those kidney bean shapes.
Yeah.
The numbers up there. These are the blanks that Michael Swords, that I recognize Michael Swords' handwriting after studying this case, that Michael Swords and Jack Bouchon made. Now, Michael Swords kept a copy of these and brought them back to QFOS, which is where I got a lot of my information from, I think it was Mark Rodiger there. Isn't he the new librarian?
I have no clue.
I think it was him. Shout out to whoever it was, sorry. But he gave me a lot of their information and Michael Swords' notes and stuff on the case. But then the other copy went to the NOAA. So these may have been FOIA'd, but I don't understand what that whole cloak and dagger story from Dave Reinhardt was, and if that was, fabrication on his part, or the person who was talking to him who happened to FOIA him and they were just screwing around. But these are the same radar maps. And of course, a copy of this magazine was forwarded to Michael Swords. And this is years later, of course, and he gets this and he's like, these are my maps. This is very strange. He ended up writing her a letter, which she didn't really take too kindly to. She thought it was a little rude from what I understand. Sure. I've really been trying to get a hold of her because I really want her perspective most of all. I mean, aside from Jack's and Holly. But she's really hard to get a hold of, which is part of the reason I agreed to film Unsolved Mysteries, is that I'd be able to make these connections, but they kept us all very separate.
Yeah.
They listened to a lot of the research that I had done, and now I'm cut from it and I'm bitter.
Should be. I'm bitter because I wanted to see you in it and laugh at you.
I know. Yeah, I was I have to admit, a bit more of a believer at the time of filming. So but that's kind of where this case sits, is we have this great witness. Like, I know witness testimony is witness testimony. However, when you have multiple independent witnesses all speaking in real time, essentially describing the same thing in the same location, because you can triangulate it from their locations.
Yeah.
Something
was
out
there.
of the ordinary was in the sky that night. I would really love to say that the radar sightings corroborate what those people were seeing, but like I said, it's not specific enough that I can tie them together, although it is the general motion and direction that they were moving in the same locations. So if someone were to draw that conclusion, I wouldn't blame them at all. It seems to fit that way. If we had that video, of the woman in, I'm sorry, she was in Marcellus, not Decatur. Marcellus is just outside of Decatur.
Okay.
But regardless, same area, looking up in the night sky, seeing them jumping around. You know what I mean? I feel like this is a truly mysterious case. I don't think there's anything about what anyone saw or described that is implicitly or conclusively alien in any way. They see lights moving in strange ways, and there was radar returns. Now, these radar returns, I should mention, when I spoke to Jack, he kept saying they were spiking and there were strong returns. Phil Klass and Robert Schaefer have said that these were temperature inversions or ground clutter. Jack knew it wasn't ground clutter because he was angling the radar up because they were jumping in elevation so high. He didn't believe that there were temperature inversions. He said the way that they're spiking is like those maps don't do a good job of displaying what the radar screen looks like. What they are essentially is a band, and it was the widest band possible. Jack was under the impression that not only were they, maybe they weren't just highly reflective of the microwaves, but they were actually maybe even emitting something that the radar was picking up. They were so bright, like brighter than storms, brighter than aircraft. But it is really interesting.
It sounds a lot like Tenerife, how they described the one of them, just like it was brighter than the sun.
It also sounds a bit like the 1952 Washington invasion.
Yeah.
You know, people saw these lights, pilots saw these lights around them, and they were picked up bright returns on multiple radars, and they were corroborated. Now, the official explanation for those were temperature inversions as well.
Yeah.
So is that a possibility? Sure. Is it an airborne kind of atmospheric phenomena that's novel? Maybe. I don't know what it is. There's nothing kind of like, there's nothing implicit about any of these things that would let me know what it is. But I do know that it is at least something out of the ordinary.
What's angering is that we know that there's video and photographical documentation, so we know we could at least have a few more points of data.
Yeah, even if it looks like
really
shit.
good ones.
I know it's lights in the sky at night, so it's not going to look like much.
Yeah.
If you know, you can tell the direction the camera's facing and the time, that's huge.
Yeah.
They're all parts of the puzzle. And MUFON is sitting on them. I don't know if you've ever been a member of MUFON or tried to.
Yes. Yeah, I paid. I was a due-paying member of that crap.
Did you ever look at the case database?
No.
There's nothing in it. It's like 1 or 2 lines per case. Actually, I joined and looked up this case, and the only thing that was mentioned in it is someone came in and reported that they, in the past, had a psychic prediction that this UFO event would happen. That was what they had on their listing on this case.
That's something.
Not even any information on this case.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because
they don't want to share it.
I have their little forms that their investigators fill out for this case. So I know there's at least that information, plus the videos and photos mentioned in the article. I know these things exist. They're not in the database.
What date does the Unsolved Mysteries one come out so we can see?
October 18th.
October 18th.
Mm-hmm.
Shit better be in there, Bill Brasky, or we're coming.
Right. Yeah. And like I said, as much as that would kind of irritate me, if it's out on the public, it's the same way I say I feel bitter about getting cut. I'm still glad that this case is getting some eyes on it.
Yeah.
I think it's worthwhile. I think it's a lot better than a lot of the cases that people discuss nowadays. I think it's better than that Calvine case by
yes, definitely.
You know, like this is a decent case, and I don't have a good solution for it.
I wonder what Lou thinks about this case. What do you think he thinks about this case?
Lou who?
Elizondo.
Lou Elizondo doesn't know about this case. He's not a UFO guy.
What?
Right?
What?
I don't know. I mean, he's got a couple books on his desk.
He did have books.
Yeah.
He's got books.
I imagine he'd feel pretty somber about this case, actually.
He does feel somber often, so
yeah.
Shout out to him.
So that is the Lake Michigan UFO case. I'm still looking to speak to more witnesses about this, and I met a few actually after doing a couple of the videos. Oh no, it wasn't my videos. It was a local news piece. that surfaced. Channel 8, it's the NBC affiliate here. They did a little piece about this about a year ago, and I actually met another witness who also said around 9:30 she had just gotten home from a basketball game, was outside her house and looked straight up, felt out of nowhere compelled to look straight up, and just saw this bright light. And she's like, it wasn't a helicopter. I've seen helicopters over there. It was like much brighter than that. And she said it hovered there and shot off. I have an interview with her also on my YouTube channel.
Oh, nice.
And then there was, what was his name? Spiegel, I think. He was a sports writer for another newspaper. He was coming out of the high school, the same high school that she came from, in fact. He was standing outside of the high school, and he said what he saw looked like the bottom of a boat almost in lights. It was really strange. She drew me a picture. I have it somewhere. It was really strange. Around the same time, it was kind of like a U almost of lights like this. There were also down in Western Michigan University, which is in Kalamazoo, south of all this. There was some students. I think they were out flying Cessnas, or ultralights, as the newspaper always seems to call them. And one of them reported to see the lights off in the distance from up there. So you have these stories of witnesses' accounts, but we don't actually have like words from these witnesses. So I just kind of leave them on the side. I think the most important are the ones recorded on the 911 call. I also have the full version of that 911 tape on my channel as well, in case anyone wants to sit there and kill their ears listening to that.
It's surprisingly audible compared to other 911 tapes I've heard. Like, you can actually make out what they're saying.
Yeah, well, they are pretty calm.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a UFO, not a crime.
That's true.
But I'm really happy that those people called the police. I'm not usually one to say that.
Yeah, I usually hate the police, but no, that's in this case, I'm glad they did it.
Just like make them do their job and record this, because then it becomes public record.
Exactly.
Right? Don't call MUFON, call the cops. Make them do something.
Yeah.
And investigate UFOs. No, I mean, like, everyone who witnessed this that I spoke to said it wasn't anything like anything they'd ever seen before. You know what I mean? You hear Daryl in the call saying maybe it's lights attached to balloons and they split apart. Yeah. But he didn't see what Troy Prince had seen earlier around the corner, where all those lights came together in a similar fashion.
Yeah.
I wouldn't imagine lights on balloons doing or lighting up someone's front yard or full porch.
I mean, this is that era where I wonder if they were just testing early drone technology, you know, crazy shit like that.
But I mean, maybe in 1994, I mean, they did have RC planes and helicopters back then.
Sure. And I'm sure that they were more advanced, had more advanced drone technology in the military at that time.
Sure.
So, yeah.
So the station manager, Garnier, Leo, I can't remember his name, Jack's boss, he would make sly claims like, I know what this is, but I can't say anything about it. I was formerly in the military. Maybe I can talk about it one day. He would make claims like that. I don't know how much stock you could put in that. And unfortunately, he's passed away, so I'm not able to talk to him.
Son of a...
No deathbed confession from him.
No deathbed confesin?
No, because
it's probably because Jeremy Corbell wasn't there. If Corbell would have been there, he would have got it.
Oh, yeah.
See? Screwing up.
He's like the ambulance chaser for UFO confessions.
I heard he hand-delivered a shirt to someone's house that ordered it and, like, creeped the dude out.
That's bizarre.
That is bizarre.
Kind of a creepy dude.
Yeah, he's going to pull some quantum jujitsu shit on him.
I cannot believe that.
He's actually pretty good at flipping, but as long as the guy doesn't move at all, it's really effective and high drama looking. But if someone like gives any kind of resistance, that stuff doesn't work too well in that.
Oh, he does. Does he do like energy Hadoukens with his chi?
No, he does legitimate jujitsu, but like it's the flashiest forms where you have someone like hold their arm out and you run up the side of their body and kind of flip off and pull their arm down into an arm bar, flying arm bars. Stuff like that. It looks really, really cool to watch it, but in practice, it's not practical, like to pull off that smooth because people could be punching you in the face. Or
do you have copies of this? I kind of want to see this.
Oh yeah. We can air it on here. It's on YouTube, I'd imagine. Look up Jeremy Corbell Quantum Jiu-Jitsu.
I love that it's quantum. I love that.
It's quantum. It's very
What's
quantum.
Quantum about it? Does he actually go into that?
I think it's probably because it's high flying, high impact, high energy throws and stuff. It's It's flashy stuff.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, it looks cool. He could probably whip my ass. So give him that.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, that's my case. I'm sure I'll go on another rant about it soon in the next couple of weeks. I know we got that episode coming out soon. I want to. I'm sure I will be highly critical of it, and
we got to do a smoking review.
Yeah, I would love to.
Yeah.
We got to start putting out that extra content, right?
Yep. Time to start smoking and reviewing and watching and shit. So
I'm already
got
smoking.
Some stuff lined up. Yeah, I'm already smoking anyways. Might as well.
So, what do we got? What do we got going on next week then? Are you going to do part 2?
I'm going to try to do part 2. I want to get a lot done on it. So far, I think I've covered 30%.
Okay.
It is a very long case and more involved. Most of the cases I see, like people cover it, try to do it in 20 minutes to an hour and a half or so.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just not doable. It's so long and it's so involved, especially if you want to talk about the little nuances.
Sure.
Debbie being left alone in the room with the computers all the time.
Mm-hmm. That is a little sus.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll get to that. And Friday I got Breeder Syndicate again. So I have my weed podcast. So anybody else here, if you like to smoke, it's Strain History. Check it out. Know what you're smoking. How about you? What you got coming up?
Nothing planned. I know Leah's in here, though we don't have anything planned for Invisible Night School for a little while. I think maybe I'll bring some kind. Well, I was thinking of bringing some kind of poltergeist related material next time, but
that would be perfect.
Well, would it be too much? Because
I think maybe your take on the Poltergeist, the Colin Wilson book, would be very integral to it.
Yeah, maybe.
Because there is no newsflash. There's no solution to this case.
Sure, I would like to bring something not yet solved though, but maybe it'll be a cold case or a true thing.
Yeah, whatever you feel like doing.
We haven't really dipped any toes. I'm not a toe guy. We haven't really broached the true crime subject.
Yeah,
so I think both of us are interested in that, and both of us want to.
Yeah,
so we'll think about that. Maybe I'll bring in a spooky ghost because it is fucking October.
Oh yeah, it is, isn't it? Yep.
It
reminds me of the South Park Spooky Ghost episode. I don't know if you've seen that, but anybody that has will know what I'm talking about.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I'll have to send you a clip. It's worth it.
All right. Cool.
All right.
Well, I think that's everything I had to say tonight about the Lake Michigan case.
All right, good.
Cool.
It's a good one. Yeah, dude, some great videos too, dude.
Nice. Yeah. Oh yeah. Check out my other videos on my Invisible Night School. Well, I'll put it in the comments or something.
Yep. Put it in the description.
I made a 2-part video, kind of short mini doc series on this case that goes over a little bit more in detail. You can check that out. That's it. That's
it. Yeah, that's all I got too.
I'm gonna go eat some snacks.
Yeah, I'm gonna go smoke.
Peace.